Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to episode 2 of Overlooked and Underappreciated Live Albums. This is a series we're going to be doing over the next, bunch of weeks, maybe even months, where we're going to take a look at, for each episode, we're going to take a look at 10 live albums that maybe don't get talked about a lot, that maybe get overshadowed by another live album that band or artist has in their catalog that gets all the acclaim, right? Or maybe these are just live albums that are great by more obscure bands, or like I said, some bands have tons of live albums and people always talk about the certain ones and forget about others that maybe are just as good. So we're not going to talk about the big live albums. So on the first episode we had lots of people who were mentioning live albums that they love a lot, but they're like real well-known live albums, right? So we've done the whole live album battle, right? The whole tournament that we had a couple of years back, right? We're not going to talk about Live at Leeds and Strangers in the Night and Tokyo Tapes and all those Get Your Yayas Out. We're not going to talk about any of those. Those are the real big ones. Everybody knows and everybody loves those live albums. These are the ones that don't show up on most people's best of live album list. Maybe some of you, right? For those of us who like more obscure live albums, sure. But we're talking about like that most casual to mid-interest level people who are into music, the live albums that everybody talks about. We're not going to talk about those here because there's plenty of content here on the channel that goes in depth on all those great famous live albums. These are going to be the ones that maybe fall under the radar kind of quite a bit, right? So I got 10 more for you today. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit today. I actually have 11 for you because one of the bands because they have so many great underappreciated live albums, I wanted to throw 2 in there. So the first one is a very cool live album from 1972 by a band from Texas that should be more well-known. I know there's probably plenty of people here on the channel who enjoy this band. I really do. They're a good hard rockin' outfit, and they have a handful of really strong albums, including this live album. The band is called Bloodrock. It's just called Bloodrock Live, right? So this, of course, was Jim Rutledge on lead vocals, Lee Pickens lead guitar, Steve Hill on keyboards, Ed Grundy bass, Rick Cobb on drums, and Nick Taylor on guitars. These guys were just a really strong, kick-ass, hard-rockin' band. I always kind of describe Bloodrock. They were kind of like the Texas cousins to Grand Funk Railroad a little bit, right? Groovy, heavy rock stuff. More Hammond organ driven, I think, these guys, like especially their early stuff is very much more influenced by like Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, that sort of thing. Screaming guitar, great bluesy vocals, music's got tons of groove to it, but it rocks, it's heavy, some of it's even kind of dark and doomy, right? So this is a great live album, which has some killer tracks on here. Castle of Thoughts, Breach Elise, these are great like early songs. Lucky in the Morning, terrific. Kool-Aid Kids, the great DOA, that's the one kind of hit single. I don't know if it was called a hit single, but like a AM and FM late night radio staple from the very early days. It's nearly 10 minutes long here. You Gotta Roll, Cheater, Jessica, and Gotta Find a Way. Gotta Find a Way is almost 10 minutes long on here. It's got a killer chorus, great guitars, just cranking song. And I think we can just show up so here we go. Cool live shots of the band. These guys, Bloodrock, were always a really good, strong band, not really big enough to be headliners, but they toured with basically everybody back in the day. So a little bit before my time when I started going to school, they were already defunct by the time I started going to concerts starting around 1980 or so. But Bloodrock Live, awesome, underrated, underappreciated live album. How about a very cool band that's been around for a long time, and their music is so quirky and hard to describe, and theatrical, and progressive, and hard rockin', and all I can call it is Tubes music. What do you want from live from the Tubes? Featuring, of course, White Punks on Dope, Don't Touch Me There, and Show Me a Reason, right? 2 LPs on 1 CD. Yeah, this is a really strong live album from the band. The Tubes are so much fun. Musically, though, so impressive. And I think a lot of people kind of overlook the fact that these guys were some serious players because of a lot of the theatricality of their music and the zaniness of their music. I always look at the Tubes. They're kind of like fall somewhere between like Frank Zappa and Max Webster, with lots of other things thrown in. That's the Tubes. You got Up from the Deep. White Punks on Dope is on here. Show Me a Reason's on here. What Do You Want from Life? Great song. Don't Touch Me There. Mondo Bondage. You get the big crime medley on here. There's lots of, you get solos on here, jamming, all sorts of cool, kooky vocalists and stuff, and jaw-dropping musicality. It's a really, really strong live album. And again, comes from pretty, early on in their career. This was like, 1978 or so. This was, way before the Tubes really got kind of big there in the early mid-'80s. So great stuff there. All right, so this guy, terrific guitar player. I don't know too many people who would deny that Rory Gallagher, I'm trying to say it like the Irish folks say his name. All my life I've said Gallagher, right? But it's Gallagher. So Irish Tour, it's always the album that everybody talks about when they talk about Rory and his many great live albums, right? But that's the one, that's the big one, that's the one that everybody talks about. However, the first live album I ever got from this guy, and still to my day, it's probably my favorite. It's just raw and uncompromising, and it's a little more rock-based, whereas Irish Tour is more of his like early kind of blues rock stuff. This is a blistering hard rock album. I'm talking about Stage Struck. And again, this was 1980, right? This was the first thing I ever heard from Rory. And I remember a guy I used to work with made me a cassette tape of this album. He's like, you got to check this out. And I was like, holy smokes. Blistering stuff on here. You got Shin Kicker on here. You got Wayward Child, Moonchild, Brute Force and Ignorance kicks ass on here. You got Bought and Soul, Last of the Independents, Shadow Play, screaming guitar work, great vocals. I mean, this is just undeniable. Hard rocking Rory Gallagher at his very best in front of like a rabid audience. This is kick-ass stuff. If you've never heard this particular album, maybe like I said, Irish Tour or any of the other live albums, but you haven't heard this one, you need to get it. Quite good. All right, let's go over to the Netherlands for a great Dutch band. I really love this band's 70s material. They originally were kind of like a psychedelic pop band, and all of a sudden they turned into this terrific heavy rock act who also touched on a little bit of prog. And then as the 70s wore on, they started to become more of like a traditional, just good, accessible hard rock band. I'm talking about Golden Earring. Live is the album. This is just terrific, people. Double album, 2 discs here. All of the great early Golden Earring songs. I mean, they have a lot of really great songs, but all the really notable ones are on here. Candy's Going Bad is just terrific on here. So anthemic, so hard rock. And She Flies on Strange Wings, killer on here. That is such a great song. One of my favorite Golden Earring songs. You got Mad Love Coming. You got 10-minute version of 8 Miles High. Of course, the great 8 Miles High. They didn't write it, but they did a great cover on one of their early albums. They even titled the album that, and really good. You got Vanilla Queen is on here, nearly 12 minutes long. Then on the second disc, you got To the Hilt, Fighting Windmills, Con Man, of course, Radar Love, 11 minutes long, their biggest hit, and then Just Like Vince Taylor. Terrific live album. I mean, it's just one straight great song after another on here. Excellent stuff. All right, let's go to the UK, Great Britain. I love this band. I've been speaking the praise of these guys for the last 30 years, and granted, they're not for everybody. I totally get that. But if you want to hear one of the great unsung progressive rock live albums of all time, doesn't get any better than Playing the Fool by Gentle Giant. You've got to have a lot of their great songs on here. What's really interesting is that if you listen to the Gentle Giant studio albums, this stuff is so meticulous and so weird and just so complex and so many textures and colors. And then they go and they play this stuff live like it's nothing. Just the same. Proclamation on Reflection. You got excerpts from the Octopus album. You got Funny Ways is on here. The Runaway Experience, So Sincere, Free Hand. They do this wild Sweet Georgia Brown breakdown thing, which is just totally wacky but totally cool. You got a medley of Peel the Paint, I Lost My Head. Jaw-droppingly amazing, and the sound quality is so good. It's just amazing that how they were able to play this stuff live, just as good if not better than the studio versions. Absolutely uncanny stuff. All right, I mentioned them before, but how about a little Max Webster from Canada? Live Magnetic Air. This actually was very hard to find on CD for the longest time. It was out of print, and then they released the box set with all the Max Webster albums. So now anybody can get this along with all the others, all remastered and whatnot. Another one of those bands where, again, kind of hard to describe the music of Max Webster. It's quirky, it's accessible, it's heavy, it's proggy, it's all that rolled into one. They play live, and they're able to duplicate all these complex songs in a live setting. So many great songs on here. Paradise Skies is on here, which is really catchy. That should have been an enormous hit. You got In Context of the Moon, terrific. Night Flights is on here, Lip Service. Here Among the Cats, Waterline, Hangover, Gravity, great stuff. Kim Mitchell and company. Killer guitar work on here, great keys, vocal harmonies to die for. Excellent stuff. There's a reason why Rush took them out on tour with them all the time, because they were a terrific band. Musically, so good. All right. So I mentioned I was going to cheat a little today. I was going to bring on board here for this episode one band who's got two, well, probably more than two, but two really notable legendary live albums that everybody talks about. Well, now, the band's been around for all these years, and they've got 1 million live albums. There's so many other strong live albums that, in my mind, it's not only all about made in Japan and made in Europe anymore. I'm talking about Deep Purple. They've got so many great live albums that have been coming out in more recent years. They're just pulling stuff out of the vaults. And this particular one came out way back when. But this is a terrific companion to Made in Japan. It's called Deep Purple in Concert. Many of you might remember when that was released on vinyl back in the day. So you get two complete recordings from 1970 and 1972 featuring the Mark II era of the band. Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Pace, and Lord, of course. So here, I always love the cover. And here on disc 1, which is from 1970, you get Speed King, Child in Time, Wring That Neck, an 18-minute version of Wring That Neck, and a 17-minute version of Mandrake Root. Again, very cool, because Wring That Neck and Mandrake Root, of course, not included on the original Made in Japan, nor was Speed King. You can now get Speed King added back in on the reissue of Made in Japan, which has those couple of tracks that are missing. But Mandrake Root and Wring That Neck, of course, were earlier Purple songs that the Mark II version of the band were doing early on the first couple tours, then later dropped those. So now here you get a whole 1970 performance of that. And this live album was released in 1980 originally. And then on disc 2, which is a show from 1972, you get closer to what you got on Made in Japan. So you get Highway Star, Strange Kind of Woman, Maybe I'm a Leo, that was not on Made in Japan. Never Before, that was not on Made in Japan. Lazy, Space Truck, and Smoke on the Water, and then Lucille. For whatever reason, they always played Lucille back in the day. I wish they would have just thrown in another original track instead of that, but whatever. But Space Truck is 20 minutes long on here. Everything else is, kind of normal length, right? I think Strange Kind of Woman is 8 minutes and change. You get that call and response thing with Richie and Ian on that. So, yeah, this is terrific. Really well recorded. And again, this came out in 80 after the band was already kaput at the time, so maybe this did not get the attention it would have deserved if they would have released it back in the day, but absolutely terrific. And then my other Deep Purple pick for today, this is what Made in Europe, which I love. If Made in Europe was a double album, which it should have been, this is what it would have been. This is Live in Paris, 1975. These are basically the last recordings of Blackmore in Deep Purple before he left to form Rainbow. So the final shows were in France, and these are the Made in Europe album was those songs, those tracks were culled from that last week of the tour. Graz and Paris and a couple other places. So what you get there are some of the great recordings from all those shows, and this basically is the whole show in Paris. So when you listen to this, you'll hear things that you remember from Made in Europe, because some of that was taken from this particular one, some was taken from Graz. I forget what the other show was, but so this is amazing, because to me, I have long been in love with Made in Europe, but I always wanted it to be a double album like Made in Japan. I always felt it was missing stuff. Well, the stuff is here. So here we've got Burn, Stormbringer, Gypsy, which is terrific on here. Gypsy is such a great song. Lady Double Dealer, you got Mistreated. Mistreated is awesome on here. Smoke on the Water, so now you have the Mark III era of the band playing some of those Mark II era classics, which they did not include on Made in Europe. So you got Smoke on the Water, then You Fool No One, another big length of You Fool No One. On disc 2, you got Space Truckin', Going Down, and Highway Star. So again, lots of stuff on here that was never on the Made in Europe album. So, some may say, and I will agree, that Coverdale and Hughes singing the Ian Gillan stuff doesn't always work. The band sounds great, but it's hard to do Ian Gillan. And Coverdale and Hughes both have different voices, and I think Hughes tends to scream a little bit too much on some of this stuff, right? But it's still cool to hear this version of the band doing those classic Mark II era songs. And I think for me, this is just so cool because you basically get the whole kit and caboodle, right? This is what Made in Europe should have been. The live album it should have been. Terrific stuff. If you can still find it, I think there's various. You can find various copies of this. This was originally released on Purple Records, but I think that this is floating out there with a different cover, maybe a different label produced it. I'm not quite sure, but I've had that for a while, and it's well worth getting. All right, so for those of you who may have watched the Curse of the Collector show this past weekend, I showed off this very cool Santana Live at Tanglewood 1970 CD that I got recently. Well, there's a bunch of really good Live at Tanglewood. Tanglewood is this great, cool venue that had some legendary concerts in Massachusetts in the early 70s. Here, Chicago Live at Tanglewood 1970. Everybody talks about the Chicago Carnegie Hall live album, which is tremendous. Chicago Live in Japan, which is tremendous, right? Those are the big live albums from the Terry Kath era. Well, now we've got, this was released 2013, I think this came out, and this is a tremendous show. A lot of this has been available on video over the years, bootleg video. You can watch most of this, if not all of it, on YouTube from 1970, the band playing, and it's just amazing. Robert Lamb on keys and vocals, Terry Kath guitar and vocals, Peter Cetera bass vocals, Lee Lagaine trumpet vocals, James Packout trombone, Walter Parazater woodwinds, Danny Serafin on drums, the classic lineup of Chicago. And man, this is so good. Recorded July 21st, 1970, Lenox, Mass. at Tanglewoods. You got Introduction, you got In the Country, Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is, 25 or 6 to 4, Poem for the People, I Don't Want Your Money, It Better End Soon, almost 15 minutes long, Beginnings, Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan, 12 minutes and change, and then I'm a Man, 8 minutes, which is, of course, the great Spencer Davis song that they crush on here. And I will tell you, Terry Kath is on fire on this album. If you are a Terry Kath fan and you love his guitar playing, you need to get this. He is all over this. This is a great hard rockin' album with great guitar work, lots of funky jazz and fusion rhythms, great horns. This is an amazing Chicago live album. Needs to be heard. All right, the final two here. So this particular band, again, has tons and tons and tons of live albums. Everybody talks about the great Fillmore set from 1970 from this band. Deservedly so, because it's one of the great ones. They've released various Fillmore East concerts over the years. You got lots of other live albums. You got some great live albums from this band in the early 90s. Beacon Theater stuff, all sorts of great stuff. The Allman Brothers had released tons of live albums in their career. However, the one that I think always got the shaft and never got the acclaim it deserved, because to me, it ranks up there with the Fillmore live set, and that is One Way Out. And this is the great live album that features the killer guitar lineup of Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks. This is live at the Beacon Theater, and this came out in, 2004. This would be the last live album that the band would release while they were still together, before Greg Allman passed away, obviously. 2-disc set, so good. So many great tracks on here. Statesboro Blues, Don't Keep Me Wondering, Midnight Rider, Rockin' Horse, Desdemona, Trouble No More, Wasted Words, Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, Instrumental Illness. This is great because it borrows classic Allman Brothers tracks from all throughout their career. Ain't Wasting Time No More, Come and Go Blues, Woman Across the River, Old Before My Time, Every Hungry Woman, High Cost of Low Living, Worried Down with the Blues, Dreams, and Whipping Post. Epic stuff. Guitar solos galore on here. Greg is singing up a storm. His sultry Hammond organ is everywhere. This is tremendous, tremendous, tremendous. So I highly recommend that. And last but not least, now we're going to go all the way back to 1970. This band's performance at the Isle of Wight Festival. This band has a classic album that, of course, always gets mentioned when you talk about classic live albums from later part of the 70s called Bursting Out. Of course, I'm talking about Jethro Tull. This is Nothing Is Easy, live at the Isle of Wight Festival. Tull, for me, I mean, I've seen lots of footage, heard lots of stuff from many performances live at the Isle of Wight in 1970. It was a classic, classic festival over there in the UK at the Isle of Wight. But Tull's set was just absolutely stellar. You got My Sunday Feeling on here, My God, With You There to Help Me, To Cry You a Song. You don't really hear many live Tull recordings with To Cry You a Song on it. Bore, Dharma for One, Nothing Is Easy, then a little medley at the end, which comprised of We Used to Know and 4,000 Mothers. And this is, of course, the band with Ian Anderson on vocals, flute, acoustic guitar, Martin Barr, electric guitar, Clive Bunker on drums, Glenn Cornick on bass, John Evan on keyboards. Absolutely a great lineup of the band. I think the next lineup even is, the next couple of lineups are just absolutely spectacular. This is Tull in the 70s, unmatched. Here is where Tull is coming into their own, moving on from a straight blues band into like a blues, folk, jazz, heavy rock, and prog band. This is kind of like where it all began. So terrific stuff, Isle of Wight 1970. So that is my last one for today. I've got a ton of others to talk about over the next coming weeks and maybe even the next couple months. So we'll see how long we go with this. I haven't really set a time limit for this particular show, because I think there's so many live albums that I want to talk about that never kind of get their due. So we'll be going through lots of them. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Let us know what you think of some of these live albums, or if there's stuff here that I talked about today that you've never checked out, you've never heard. Well, now you know what you need to do. This is the show that's all about going and listening, going and join, and maybe find a couple things you may want to go out there and buy that you haven't had in your collection previously. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Very, very important. So thanks for watching, everybody. I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one. We'll see you real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.